Hello, my darling, and welcome to today's story time. If you like what you hear, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And now, on with our story time. I stood overcome by my amazing realization, and then the most horrible questionings came rushing into my mind. They began leaping into the air, first one and then the other, whooping and grunting. Then one slipped, and for a moment was on all fours, to recover indeed forthwith. But that transitory gleam of the true animalism of these monsters was enough. I turned as noiselessly as possible, and becoming every now and then rigid with the fear of being discovered, as a branch cracked or a leaf rustled, I pushed back into the bushes. It was long before I grew bolder and dared to move freely. My only idea for the moment was to get away from these foul beings, and I scarcely noticed that I had emerged upon a faint pathway amidst the trees. Then suddenly, traversing a little glade, I saw with an unpleasant start two clumsy legs among the trees, walking with noiseless footsteps parallel with my course, and perhaps 30 yards away from me. The head and upper part of the body were hidden by a tangle of creeper. I stopped abruptly, hoping the creature did not see me. The feet stopped when I did. So nervous was I that I controlled an impulse to headlong flight with the utmost difficulty. Then looking hard, I distinguished, through the interlacing network, the head and body of the brute I had seen drinking. He moved his head. There was an emerald flash in his eyes as he glanced at me from the shadow of the trees, a half-luminous color that vanished as he turned his head again. He was motionless for a moment, and then with a noiseless tread began running through the green confusion. In another moment, he had vanished behind some bushes. I could not see him, but I felt that he had stopped and was watching me again. What on earth was he, man or beast? What did he want with me? I had no weapon, not even a stick. Flight would be madness. At any rate, the creature, whatever it was, lacked the courage to attack me. Setting my teeth hard, I walked straight towards him. I was anxious not to show the fear that seemed chilling my backbone. I pushed through a tangle of tall, white-flowered bushes and saw him 20 paces beyond, looking over his shoulder at me and hesitating. I advanced a step or two, looking steadfastly into his eyes. "Who are you?" I asked. He tried to meet my gaze. "No," he said suddenly, and turning, went bounding away from me through the undergrowth. Then he turned and stared at me again. His eyes shone brightly out of the dusk under the trees. My heart was in my mouth, but I felt my only chance was a bluff, and I walked steadily towards him. He turned again and vanished into the dusk. Once more I thought I caught the glint of his eyes, and that was all. For the first time, I realized how the lateness of the hour might affect me. The sun had set some minutes since. The swift dusk of the tropics was already fading out of the eastern sky, and a pioneer moth fluttered silently by my head. Unless I would spend the night among the unknown dangers of this mysterious forest, I must hasten back to the enclosure. The thought of a return to that pain-haunted refuge was extremely disagreeable, but still more so was the idea of being overtaken in the open darkness and all that darkness might conceal. I gave one more look into the blue shadows that had swallowed up this odd creature, and then retraced my way down the slope towards the stream, going as I judged in the direction from which I had come. I walked eagerly, my mind confused with many things, and presently I found myself in a level place among scattered trees. The colorless clearness that comes after the sunset flush was darkling. The blue sky above grew momentarily deeper, and the little stars one by one pierced the attenuated light. The interspaces of the trees, the gaps in the further vegetation, had all been hazy blue in the daylight, but was now black and mysterious. I pushed on. The color vanished from the world. The treetops rose against the luminous blue sky in an inky silhouette, and all below that outline melted into one formless blackness. Presently the trees grew thinner, and the shrubby undergrowth more abundant. Then there was a desolate space covered with a white sand, and then another expanse of tangled bushes. I do not remember crossing the sand opening before. I began to feel tormented by a faint rustling upon my right side. I thought at first it was fancy, for whenever I stopped, there was silence, save for the evening breeze in the treetops. And when I turned to hurry on again, there was an echo to my footsteps. I turned away from the thickets, keeping to more open ground, and endeavoring by sudden turns now and then to surprise something in the act of creeping upon me. I saw nothing, and nevertheless my sense of another presence grew steadily. I increased my pace, and after some time came to a slight ridge, crossed it, and turned sharply, regarding it steadfastly from the further side. It came out black and clear-cut against the darkling sky, and presently a shapeless lump heaved up momentarily against the skyline and vanished again. I felt assured now that my tawny-faced antagonist was stalking me once more, and coupled with that was another unpleasant realization that I had lost my way. For a time, I hurried on, hopelessly perplexed, and pursued by that stealthy approach. Whatever it was, the creature lacked either the courage to attack me, or it was waiting to take me at some disadvantage. I kept studiously to the open. At times I would turn and listen, and presently I had half persuaded myself that my pursuer had abandoned the chase, or was a mere creation of my disordered imagination. Then I heard the sound of the sea. I quickened my footsteps almost into a run, and immediately there was a stumble in my rear. I turned suddenly and stared at the uncertain trees behind me. One black shadow seemed to leap into another. I listened, rigid, hearing my heart beat, hearing nothing but the creep of the blood in my ears. I thought that my nerves were unstrung and that my imagination was tricking me, and I turned resolutely towards the sound of the sea again. In a minute or so, the trees grew thinner, and I emerged upon a bare, low headland running out in the somber water. The night was calm and clear, and the reflection of the growing multitude of the stars shivered in the tranquil heaving of the sea. Some way out, the wash upon a regular band of reef shone with a pallid light of its own. Westward, I saw the zodiacal light mingling with the yellow brilliance of the evening star. The coast fell away from me to the east, and westward it was hidden by the shoulder of the cape. Finally, I recalled the fact that Moreau's beach lay to the west. A twig snapped behind me, and there was a rustle. I turned and stood facing the dark trees. I could see nothing, or else I could see too much. Every dark form in the dimness had its own ominous quality, its peculiar suggestion of alert watchfulness. So I stood for perhaps 1 minute, and then, with an eye to the trees still, turned westward to cross the headland. As I moved, one among the lurking shadows moved to follow me. My heart was beating quickly. Presently, the broad sweep of bay to the westward became visible, and I halted again. The noiseless shadow halted a dozen yards from me. A little point of light shone on the further bend of the curve, and the gray sweep of the sandy beach lay faint under the starlight. Perhaps 2 miles away was that little point of light. To get to the beach, I should have to go through the trees where the shadows lurked and down a bushy slope. I could see the creature more distinctly now. It was no real animal, for it stood erect. At that I opened my mouth to speak and found a hoarse phlegm choking my voice. I tried again and shouted, "Who is there?" There was no answer. I advanced a step. The creature did not move, only gathered itself together. My foot struck a stone. That gave me an idea. Without taking my eyes off the black form before me, I stooped and picked up a lump of rock. But my motion towards the thing, and it turned abruptly as a dog might have done, and slunk away into the further darkness. Then I recalled a schoolboy expedient against big dogs, and twisted the rock into my handkerchief and gave this a turn around my wrist. I heard a movement further off among the shadows, as if the thing was in retreat. Then suddenly my tense excitement gave way. I broke into a profuse perspiration and fell a trembling with my adversary routed and this weapon in my hand. It was some time before I could summon resolution to go down through the trees and bushes upon the flank of the headland to the beach. At last I took off running, and as I emerged from the thicket upon the sand, I heard some other body come crashing after me. At that I completely lost my head with fear and began running along the sand. Forthwith, there came the swift patter of soft feet in pursuit. I gave a wild cry and redoubled my pace. Some dim, dark things about 3 or 4 times the size of rabbits went running or hopping up from the beach towards the bushes as I passed. So long as I live, I shall remember the terror of that chase. I ran near the water's edge and heard every now and then the splash of feet gaining upon me. Far away, hopelessly far, was the yellow light. All the night about us was black and still. Splash, splash, came the pursuing feet, nearer and nearer. I felt my breath going, for I was quite out of training. It whooped as I drew it in, and I felt a pain like a knife at my side. I perceived the thing would come up with me long before I reached the enclosure, and desperate and sobbing for my breath, I wheeled round upon it and struck at it as it came up to me, struck with all of my strength. The stone came out of the sling of the handkerchief. As I turned, the thing, which had been running on all fours, rose to its feet. The missile fell fair of its left temple. The skull rang loud, and the animal man blundered into me, thrust me back with its hands, and went staggering past me. It fell headlong upon the sand with its face in the water, and there it lay still. I could not bring myself to approach the thing. I left it there, with the water rippling around it under the still stars, but giving it a wide berth to to pursue my way towards the yellow glow of the house. And presently, with a positive effect of relief, came the pitiful moaning of the puma, the sound that had originally driven me out to explore this mysterious island. At that, though I was faint and horribly fatigued, I gathered together all of my strength and began running again towards the light. I thought I heard a voice calling me. As I drew near the house, I saw that the light shone from the door of my room, and then I heard coming from out of the darkness at the side of that orange oblong of light the voice of Montgomery shouting, "Prendick." I continued running. Presently I heard him again. I replied with a feeble, "Hello," and in another moment had staggered up to him. "Where have you been?" he asked, holding me at arm's length, so that the light from the door fell upon my face. "We have both been so busy, we forgot about you until about half an hour ago." He led me into the room and sat me down in the deck chair. For a moment I was blinded by the light. "We did not think you would start to explore this island of ours without telling us," he said. And then, "I was afraid. But what? You're back. Hello." My last remaining strength slipped from me, and my head fell forward on my chest. I think he found a certain satisfaction in giving me brandy. "For God's sake," said I, "fasten that door." "Oh, you've been meeting some of our curiosities, eh?" he said. He locked the door and turned to me again. He asked me no questions, but gave me some more brandy and water and pressed me to eat. I was in a state of collapse. He said something vague about his forgetting to warn me, and asked me briefly when I left the house and what I had seen. I answered him as briefly, in fragmentary sentences. "Tell me what it all means," I said. I was in a state bordering on hysterics. "It's nothing so very dreadful," he said, "but I think you've had enough for one day." In the distance, the puma suddenly gave a sharp yell of pain. At that he swore under his breath. "I'm damned," he said, "if this place is not as bad as Gower Street with its cats." "Montgomery," I said, "what was that thing that came after me? Was it a beast, or was it a man?" "If you don't sleep tonight," he said, "you'll be off your head tomorrow." I stood up in front of him. "What was that thing that came after me?" I repeated. He looked me square in the eyes and twisted his mouth askew. His eyes, which had seemed animated a minute before, went dull. "From your account," he said, "I'm thinking it was a bogle." I felt a gust of intense irritation, which passed as quickly as it came. I flung myself onto the chair again and pressed my hands on my forehead. The puma was crying. Montgomery came round behind me and put his hand on my shoulder. "Look here, Prendick," he said. "I had no business to let you drift into this silly island of ours. But it's not so bad as you feel, man. Your nerves are worked to rags. Let me give you something that'll help you sleep. You must simply get to sleep, or I won't answer for it." I did not reply to him. I bowed forward and covered my face with my hands. Presently he returned with a small measure containing a dark liquid. This he gave me. I took it unresistingly, and he helped me into the hammock. When I awoke, it was broad day. For a while I lay flat, staring at the roof above me. The rafters, I observed, were made out of the timbers of a ship. Then I turned my head and saw a meal prepared for me on the table. I perceived that I was hungry and prepared to claim her out of the hammock, which, very politely anticipating my intention, twisted round and deposited me upon all fours on the floor. I got up and sat down before the food. I had a heavy feeling in my head, and only the vaguest memory at first of all the things that happened overnight. The morning breeze blew very pleasantly through the unglazed window, and that and the food contributed to the sense of animal comfort which I experienced. Presently the door behind me, the door inward towards the yard of the enclosure, opened. I turned and saw Montgomery's face. And this, my darling, ends our story time for today. As always, I hope that you have very sweet and creepy dreams. Good night.